The scar tissue in my lungs was burning as I watched my stepmother Eleanor adjust Bethany's perfect blonde curls in the hallway mirror, completely ignoring my wheezing gasps from the living room couch. My inhaler had been empty for 3 days. I'd told them repeatedly. But today was Bethany's big recital at the prestigious Steinway Hall, and nothing, not even my increasingly labored breathing, was going to interrupt that. "Mom," I tried to call out, but it came as barely a whisper. My chest felt like someone had wrapped steel bands around it and was slowly tightening them, notch by notch. "Bethany, darling, you look absolutely radiant," Eleanor cooed, her voice dripping with maternal pride she'd never once directed at me. "This navy dress brings out your eyes perfectly. The judges won't be able to resist you." My father appeared at the top of the stairs, adjusting his tie, the expensive silk one he saved for important occasions. Important occasions that apparently never included anything related to me. "Is everyone ready? We need to leave in 5 minutes. Traffic into the city will be murder." "I can't breathe," I managed, louder this time, my vision starting to spot at the edges. Eleanor's head snapped toward me, her face twisting with that familiar expression of annoyed inconvenience. "Riley, for God's sake, not today. This is Bethany's moment. Can't you just use your inhaler?" "It's empty," I gasped, clutching my chest. I told you 3 days ago." "Well, you should have reminded us again," my father said dismissively, checking his watch. "We'll get you a refill tomorrow. Just try to breathe slowly and calm down. You're probably having a panic attack and making it worse." I wasn't having a panic attack. I was having a severe asthma attack, and somewhere in the fog of oxygen deprivation, I realized with crystal clarity that if I passed out here, they would still leave. They would go to Bethany's recital and leave me here on this couch, alone, potentially dying, because a piano performance was more important than my life. That's when the memories hit me like a freight train. The hospital room, the beeping monitors, the doctor's solemn face telling my father I hadn't made it, Eleanor's crocodile tears that didn't quite reach her eyes, Bethany's barely concealed relief that she'd no longer have to share anything with her unwanted stepsister. I had died like this before, exactly like this. Same recital, same empty inhaler, same dismissive words. Except in that life, I had passed out after they left. And by the time a neighbor heard my phone's emergency alert because I'd had just enough consciousness to trigger it, it was too late. Severe hypoxia, brain damage. I'd lingered for 3 days before my father signed the papers to let me go, and now I was here again, living it over, with all those memories flooding back like a dam had burst in my mind. Some cosmic force had given me another chance, and this time I understood exactly what my family was. They weren't just neglectful or prioritizing. They were willing to let me die rather than inconvenience Bethany's carefully curated path to perfection. But this time, I had something they didn't know about. I had knowledge. I had the memories of everything that would happen next. And this time, I wasn't calling 911. Not because I wanted to die, God, no. The terror of suffocating was exactly as horrible as I remembered. But because I knew now that my family's abandonment today, their choice to leave me here gasping for air while they applauded Bethany's Mozart, was going to be the foundation of everything I needed to destroy them. I just had to survive the next hour on my own. Let me take you back 6 years to explain how we got here. To this moment where my own family could watch me suffocate and feel nothing but irritation at the bad timing. My mother died when I was 8. Ovarian cancer, aggressive and merciless. She'd been a brilliant woman, a research scientist working on environmental conservation, and she'd loved me with a ferocity that I only fully appreciated after she was gone. For 2 years, it was just Dad and me. He'd been sad, distant, but we'd managed. He'd tried in his way. Then he met Eleanor at a pharmaceutical company mixer. Eleanor Whitmore was everything my mother wasn't. Socially ambitious, obsessed with appearances, and utterly devoted to her daughter Bethany's success above all else. Bethany was my age, blonde and pretty in that conventional way that made adults coo, and already deep into her piano training with dreams of becoming a concert pianist. When Dad announced they were getting married, I'd been cautiously hopeful. Maybe I'd get a sister, maybe we'd be a family again. I was so catastrophically wrong. The change was gradual at first. Eleanor would forget to include me in dinner plans, claiming she'd thought I was eating at a friend's house. She'd buy Bethany new clothes for school and tell me to wear my old things one more year because they were still perfectly good. Small slights that my father either didn't notice or chose to ignore because Eleanor made him happy in a way he hadn't been since Mom died. But it got worse. So much worse. Bethany and I both played piano. My mother had taught me before she got sick, and it was one of the few connections I still had to her. I was good too. Better than Bethany, actually, though you'd never know it from how our household operated. When we both auditioned for the youth orchestra, I made first chair and Bethany made second. I came home excited to share the news. Eleanor's face had gone white, then red. That can't be right. Bethany has been training with Mr. Kovac for 3 years. There must be some mistake. There's no mistake, I'd said, clutching my acceptance letter. I guess I did well. That night, Eleanor had gone into my room while I slept and destroyed my mother's piano books, old, annotated. Editions that Mom had written teaching notes in. That couldn't be replaced. She'd torn out pages, spilled coffee on them, ruined every single one. When I found them in the morning and started crying, she'd stood in the doorway with her arms crossed. "You must have left them near the coffee maker," she said coolly. "How careless. I hope you've learned to take better care of your things." I'd known it was her, but when I told my father, he'd sighed and said, "Accidents happen, and I shouldn't make accusations without proof." He'd bought me new piano books, generic, mass-market editions without my mother's handwriting in them, and considered the matter closed. I'd quit the youth orchestra 2 weeks later. Bethany had moved up to first chair. Eleanor had been radiant at the celebration dinner. I hadn't been invited. Eleanor said it was just for the 3 of them, since it was Bethany's achievement. That was the pattern that emerged over the next 4 years. Anything I succeeded at was either sabotaged, minimized, or appropriated. When I won a science fair with a project about water purification, inspired by my mother's work, Eleanor had somehow lost the permission slip for the state competition, claiming she never received it. When I made honor roll, the celebration dinner was canceled because Bethany had a piano rehearsal. When I got a leading role in the school play, my father missed the performance because Bethany had a recital the same night in a different city. The message was clear. I didn't matter. Only Bethany's piano career mattered. And the worst part? My father let it happen. He was so desperate to maintain his new happy family, so grateful that Eleanor had pulled him out of his grief, that he couldn't see or refused to see how she was erasing me from our lives. The financial disparity was stark too. Bethany got a Steinway grand piano for the house, $60,000. I asked for $100 to join the science club, and my father said we needed to be more careful with money. Bethany went to an elite private school with extensive music programs. I stayed in public school because it was closer and I seemed to have friends there. Bethany got designer clothes, professional headshots, international competitions. I got hand-me-downs and was told to get a part-time job if I wanted spending money. I got that job, working at a bookstore, and Eleanor promptly started charging me rent. At 16, for my childhood bedroom, $200 a month, which was nearly everything I earned. "It's important to learn financial responsibility," she'd said, while writing another check for Bethany's private piano instructor who charged $300 per hour. But the worst betrayal was medical. I'd developed asthma around age 13, probably stress-induced, though the doctor couldn't pinpoint a specific cause. It was usually manageable with a daily inhaler and a rescue inhaler for attacks. Usually, except Eleanor was supposed to manage my prescription since I was a minor, and she consistently forgot to refill them on time. I'd end up in the ER twice before my first death. The first time, Eleanor acted appropriately concerned in front of the doctors, then berated me in the car for being dramatic and wasting everyone's time and money. The second time, Bethany had missed a piano lesson to drive me to the hospital, and Eleanor had been so coldly furious that I'd learned to just endure, to try to manage attacks on my own, to ration my medication. Which brings us to the week before the Steinway Hall recital in my previous life. The most important performance of Bethany's young career, she'd been saying for months. A prestigious showcase where talent scouts and teachers from Juilliard and Curtis would be in attendance. Bethany's big break. Her moment. I'd asked Eleanor 3 times that week to refill my rescue inhaler prescription. She'd wave me off each time, distracted by Bethany's needs. Dress fittings, rehearsal schedules, arrangements for the reception after the recital. "I'll get to it, Riley. Stop pestering me." She never got to it. And on the morning of the recital, when my chest started tightening and I reached for my inhaler and heard that hollow, empty rattle, I'd felt the first flutter of real fear, but I told myself it would be fine. Surely if I had a real attack, they'd take me to the pharmacy on the way to the hospital. Surely my life was worth a 30-minute delay to Bethany's recital. I'd been so naive. Because when the attack came on strong, triggered by stress and the cleaning products Eleanor had insisted on using throughout the house that morning to make it perfect for the post-recital photographs, and I'd called for help, they'd looked at me with such naked annoyance that I'd finally understood. I was not their daughter. I was not their sister. I was an inconvenience, an obstacle, a problem to be managed and minimized. And when Eleanor had said those words, "Can't you just try to breathe slowly and calm down?" While adjusting Bethany's hair and ignoring my oxygen-starved gasping, I'd known with horrible certainty that they were going to leave me here. They did. I'd watched them walk out the door, all dressed up, Father's hand on Eleanor's back, Bethany clutching her sheet music. The door closed. The car started. They drove away. I'd managed to trigger my phone's emergency alert before losing consciousness. The neighbor, Mrs. Chen, had found me 40 minutes later and called 911. The EMTs had worked on me for 20 minutes before getting my heart restarted. But the brain damage from oxygen deprivation was severe. My father had unplugged my life support 3 days later, Eleanor standing beside him with her hand on his shoulder, whispering about letting me go and not wanting me to suffer. Bethany hadn't even come to the hospital after that first day. The reading of the will had been perfunctory. Everything went to my father, who was already talking about selling our family home, my mother's home, to buy something more suitable in the city, closer to the music conservatory Bethany would be attending. I died knowing they were relieved, that my death had been, for them, a solution to the problem of my existence. But somehow, impossibly, I'd woken up again, 6 months earlier, with all my memories intact. And this time, I knew exactly what I was dealing with. So here I was, reliving the worst moment of my previous life, and I had to make a choice. Fight for survival on my own, or try to force them to help me and potentially change the timeline in ways I couldn't predict or control. I chose survival and strategy. As soon as the front door closed behind them, I focused everything I had on controlled breathing. Slow, shallow breaths. Don't panic. Panic makes it worse. I'd read everything I could about managing asthma attacks in my previous life, during those long days hooked up to machines when the doctors had explained what went wrong. I pulled my phone out, hands shaking, and texted Mrs. Chen next door. "Having bad asthma attack. Family left for event. Inhaler empty. Can you help?" Mrs. Chen, bless her, responded in 30 seconds. "Coming now. Stay calm, sweetheart." She had a key to our house from years ago when she used to check on me after school before Eleanor entered our lives. She was there in 2 minutes, bursting through the door with her own son's old inhaler. He'd had asthma as a child. "Breathe, Riley, slow and steady," she coached, helping me use the inhaler. It wasn't my prescription, but it was enough. Within 10 minutes, the vice around my chest had loosened. Within 20, I could breathe almost normally again. "Where is your family?" Mrs. Chen demanded, her kind face twisted with anger. "Why did they leave you like this?" "Bethany's recital," I said, my voice still hoarse. "At Steinway Hall, they couldn't miss it." Mrs. Chen's expression went from angry to absolutely livid. "They left you having an asthma attack to go to a piano recital? Riley, that's criminal neglect." "It's okay, I said quickly, even though it wasn't. Even though she was right. "I'm fine now, thank you for coming." But Mrs. Chen was already pulling out her phone. "I'm calling your father." "No," I said too sharply. She looked at me in surprise. "I mean, please don't. It'll just make things worse when they get home. They'll say I'm being dramatic, that I'm trying to ruin Bethany's day. Please, Mrs. Chen, I'm okay now. That's what matters." She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see her understanding crystallize. She'd probably noticed things over the years, the way neighbors do. The way I'd gone from a confident kid to a quiet, withdrawn teenager. The way Eleanor and Bethany got everything, while I got nothing. "This isn't right," she said softly. "Riley, this isn't how families should work." "I know," I said, and then, because I needed an ally and Mrs. Chen was good and kind and actually gave a damn about me, I added, "But I have a plan, I just need time. Can you just be here for me? Be someone I can count on? That's all I need right now." Mrs. Chen studied my face, and whatever she saw there made her nod slowly. "Of course, honey, anytime, day or night." She squeezed my hand. "But I'm getting you a new inhaler today. My son's old doctor can write an emergency prescription. This is not happening again." She did exactly that. By the time my family returned that evening, after the recital, after the celebratory dinner I hadn't been invited to, after the photos and the schmoozing with the talent scouts, I had a new rescue inhaler, a written prescription for refills that didn't require Eleanor's involvement, and Mrs. Chen's son's old nebulizer just in case. I was in my room doing homework, breathing perfectly normally. Eleanor poked her head in, her face flushed with champagne and success. "Oh, good, you're fine. I told your father you were being dramatic." Bethany was absolutely spectacular, by the way. The Juilliard scout asked for her contact information. "That's great," I said neutrally. I'm really happy for her." Eleanor blinked, surprised by my lack of argument or complaint. "Well, good. Get some rest." She closed the door. She had no idea that I'd just survived the event that killed me in my previous life. That I documented everything. The empty inhaler, the ignored requests, the text timestamps showing exactly when I'd begged for help and when they'd left. That Mrs. Chen had witnessed the aftermath and was prepared to testify if needed. I was building a case. But not for now, for later. Because I remembered what happened after this recital in my previous life, and I knew exactly where the cracks in Eleanor's perfect facade would appear. I knew which of Bethany's opportunities would fail, which of Eleanor's social climbing attempts would backfire, and which financial decisions my father would make that would leave them vulnerable. I knew everything, and I was going to use it. But first, I had to make myself indispensable. I had to become someone they couldn't afford to ignore or abuse, someone with power, and I knew exactly how to do it. The thing about being reborn with full memories is that you don't just remember the big events, the traumas, the deaths, the betrayals. You remember everything, including things you barely paid attention to the first time around, like the conversation I'd overheard between my father and his business partner 3 months before I died. They'd been in the study, drinking scotch, talking about a startup company called Neuralink, some biotech firm developing brain-computer interfaces. My father had been intrigued, but ultimately passed on investing because Eleanor had convinced him to put that money into Bethany's European tour instead. Neuralink had gone on to be acquired by a major tech company for billions. My father's business partner had made enough money to retire at 45. My father had gotten to watch Bethany play piano in Vienna, Prague, and Munich to politely applauding audiences who forgot her the moment she left the stage. I also remembered the lottery numbers from a small local drawing 2 months from now. Not the Powerball, that would be too obvious, too much money, too many questions. But a $50,000 state lottery win? That was the kind of thing that happened to normal people. Lucky, but believable. And I remembered the names of every major scandal that was about to break. The senator who would be caught embezzling in 3 weeks. The celebrity chef whose restaurant empire was about to collapse due to health violations. The pharmaceutical company, Eleanor's employer, that was about to be sued for knowingly selling contaminated drugs. Knowledge was power. And I had 6 months of future knowledge stored in my head, but I had to be smart about how I used it. The first thing I did was take the money I'd saved from my bookstore job, about $800 that I'd been hiding from Eleanor's rent collection, and I opened a bank account at a different bank, one where my family didn't have connections. I used Mrs. Chen's address so the statements wouldn't come to my house. The second thing I did was start documenting everything. Every time Eleanor forgot something I needed. Every time Bethany was favored over me. Every disparaging comment, every instance of unequal treatment, every penny that went to Bethany's career versus what I received. I created a locked digital folder with photos, recordings, receipts, and detailed notes. I also started researching emancipation laws. I was 17, 1 year from automatic freedom, but that year felt like an eternity. However, I could petition for emancipation at 17 if I could prove I was financially independent and living in a hostile environment. I'd need evidence. I was gathering it. The third thing I did was start making money. Real money. I created an anonymous blog about classical music, using all the knowledge I'd absorbed over the years of being dragged to Bethany's events. I wrote detailed, insightful reviews of performances and recordings. I analyzed techniques, compared interpretations, discussed the politics of the classical music world. I was funny, sharp, and surprisingly knowledgeable for an anonymous blogger. Within 3 weeks, I had 10,000 followers. Within 6 weeks, I had advertisers reaching out. Small money at first, $50 here, $100 there. But it grew. I also started tutoring through an online platform, using my mother's old research to help students with advanced science courses. I was good at explaining complex concepts. I'd inherited that from her. The platform took a cut, but I was still making $300 a week within a month. I took every penny I made and saved it, Miss Asasi. Chen let me keep a lockbox at her house. I was building a war chest, and then I waited for my moment, because I knew it was coming. Bethany had gotten attention from the Juilliard Scout, yes, but I remembered what happened next. She'd been invited to audition for their pre-college program. She'd be competing against the best young pianists in the country. And Bethany, for all her expensive training and Eleanor's devotion, wasn't actually that good. She was technically proficient, but emotionally hollow. Her playing was perfect and completely forgettable. The audition was in 3 weeks. She was going to fail, and Eleanor's entire identity was wrapped up in Bethany's success. The rejection was going to break something in Eleanor, and that's when she'd start making mistakes. I just had to be patient. The night before Bethany's Juilliard audition, I did something risky. I snuck into her room and looked at her audition piece. She was playing Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor, a dramatic, technically demanding piece that was, frankly, beyond her skill level. Eleanor had insisted on it because it was impressive and showy. But I could see from Bethany's practice recordings, she filmed herself constantly, obsessively, that she couldn't quite handle the emotional depth required. Her timing was off in the subtle ways that separated good pianists from great ones. Her dynamics were too uniform. She was hitting the notes, but she wasn't feeling the music. She was going to play it adequately, and adequate wasn't going to get her into Juilliard. I could have sabotaged her. I had the knowledge and opportunity, but I didn't need to. Bethany was going to sabotage herself with Eleanor's misguided pushing and her own limitations. The truth was, Bethany was never going to be a great pianist. She'd be a decent one, maybe even a good one, but not great. And Eleanor couldn't accept that. The audition day came, the family got dressed up again. This was an event. They drove into the city, all nervous excitement and last-minute instructions from Eleanor to Bethany. I stayed home, claiming I had a test to study for. Eleanor barely acknowledged this, too focused on Bethany's approaching moment of glory. I spent the day writing blog posts, tutoring online students, and checking my various revenue streams. My hidden bank account was up to $3,000. Not enough yet, but growing. They returned 8 hours later. I heard them before I saw them. Eleanor's voice, high and strained, insisting that the judges didn't understand Bethany's interpretation and that they were biased toward a more traditional style. Bethany had been rejected. I came downstairs to find Bethany crying at the kitchen table, still in her audition dress. My father looked exhausted and uncomfortable. Eleanor was pacing, her face red, her carefully maintained composure cracking. "Those judges don't know what they're doing," Eleanor was saying. "Bethany was brilliant. They're probably just jealous of young talent, or they've already decided who they're accepting and the auditions are just for show. It's corrupt. The whole system is corrupt." "Mom, I messed up the third page," Bethany sobbed. "I could feel it falling apart and I couldn't." "You did not mess up," Eleanor snapped. "I won't hear that. You were perfect. This is their failure, not yours." I stood in the doorway, and 3 pairs of eyes turned to me. Bethany's were red and resentful. She'd always blame me when things went wrong, as if my mere existence jinxed her success. Eleanor's were hard and calculating. My father's were just tired. "I'm sorry, Bethany," I said, and I meant it. Not because I wanted her to succeed at my expense, but because I knew what it felt like to fail, to pour your heart into something and come up short. That really sucks. Like you care, Bethany spat. You're probably thrilled. You've always been jealous of me. I could have argued, could have pointed out all the ways that was backwards, but I didn't. Instead, I just said, I hope you find something that makes you happy, and went back upstairs. Behind me, I heard Eleanor's voice rise again. See? Even Riley feels sorry for you. We can't let them defeat you like this. We'll find another program. Curtis, Manhattan School of Music. You're going to be a great pianist, Bethany. I won't let anyone tell you otherwise. That was Eleanor's fundamental problem. She couldn't accept reality when it contradicted her vision. She was going to keep pushing Bethany into a career she wasn't suited for, keep spending money they increasingly didn't have, keep sacrificing everything, including basic decency to me, for a dream that would never materialize. And it was going to destroy them. I just had to wait. The cracks spread faster than I expected. A week after the Juilliard rejection, Eleanor spent $12,000 on an intensive summer program at Aspen Music Festival for Bethany. My father tried to protest. Money was getting tighter. His business was facing some unexpected setbacks. But Eleanor was immovable. This is an investment in our daughter's future, she'd said coldly. Unless you want to see her fail. 2 weeks later, the pharmaceutical company where Eleanor worked was hit with the lawsuit I'd remembered. Contaminated drugs, hundreds of patients affected, massive financial penalties incoming. The company started laying people off. Eleanor, with her middling performance and her reputation for taking excessive time off for Bethany's events, was in the third round of cuts. She came home and told my father she'd been restructured. She didn't cry. Eleanor didn't cry. She just started drinking wine and planning Bethany's next competition, an international one in London that would cost $20,000 between travel, accommodations, and entry fees. We can't afford that, my father said, the strain showing in his voice. Eleanor, I need you to hear me. We cannot afford that. I can barely cover the mortgage right now. Then we'll take out a loan. This is Bethany's career. You don't sacrifice your child's future because of temporary financial problems. She's not going to be a concert pianist, my father said. And I froze at the top of the stairs where I'd been eavesdropping. He'd never said it out loud before. Eleanor, she's talented, but so are thousands of other kids. She didn't get into Juilliard. She's been rejected from 4 other programs. Maybe it's time to consider other paths. The sound of a slap echoed through the house. How dare you, Eleanor hissed. How dare you give up on our daughter? Bethany is exceptional. She's brilliant. She's going to be famous. And if you can't see that, if you can't support her, then maybe I married the wrong man. Silence. Then my father's heavy footsteps heading to his study, the sound of the door closing. Eleanor stood in the kitchen, breathing hard, her hands still raised. Bethany appeared from the living room, her face pale. Mom, she started. Not now, Eleanor snapped. Go practice. The London competition is in 2 months. You need to be perfect. I went back to my room and pulled out my phone. I had an email from one of my blog advertisers. A classical music magazine wanted to hire me as a regular contributor. The pay was $200 per article, and they wanted 1 article per week. I accepted immediately. I also had a message from the Lottery Commission. My numbers had come up. $50,000 minus taxes, $35,000 deposited into my secret account. I was 17 years old with almost $40,000 in the bank, and my family was falling apart, right on schedule. The next 2 months were a masterclass in watching a family self-destruct. Eleanor couldn't find another job. She was blacklisted in the pharmaceutical industry after her company's scandal, and her resume was weak outside that field. She'd spent the last 10 years focused on Bethany's career instead of her own. My father's business was struggling because he'd lost a major client to a competitor. Money was genuinely tight. But Eleanor wouldn't bend. She put the London trip on credit cards. 3 different credit cards. She bought Bethany new performance dresses, paid for extra coaching sessions, arranged for professional photos and promotional materials. She was doubling down, tripling down, acting as if sheer willpower and spending could manifest the success she'd promised Bethany. Bethany, for her part, was cracking under the pressure. She practiced 8 hours a day. Her hands were developing repetitive stress injuries. She stopped eating properly. She snapped at everyone, including Eleanor. And my father started drinking. Not heavily, but enough. He'd come home from work, pour himself scotch, and sit in his study until late. He stopped asking about Bethany's practices. He stopped fighting Eleanor about money. He just checked out. I stayed quiet, stayed out of the way, and kept building my financial independence. My blog was now making $2,000 a month. My tutoring brought in another $1,500. The magazine articles added $800. I was making more money than Eleanor had at her job, and no one in my family had any idea. I'd also started the process of documenting my case for emancipation. I had Mrs. Chen ready to testify about the asthma incident. I had records of the unequal spending. I had evidence of emotional abuse and neglect. My lawyer, a young woman who did pro bono work for teenagers in tough family situations, said my case was solid. "You're clearly financially independent," she'd said, "and the documented neglect is severe. The asthma incident alone might be enough for criminal charges." "I don't want to press charges," I'd said. "I just want to be free." "We can make that happen. But Riley, why wait? You could file now." "I need to wait," I'd said, not explaining that I knew exactly when to strike for maximum impact. "Trust me, 2 more months." Because the London competition was in 6 weeks and I knew I remembered that Bethany was going to place dead last, she was going to give the worst performance of her career, her stress injuries would cause her to fumble notes catastrophically, and the judges were going to be brutal in their assessments. One of them would tell Eleanor within Bethany's hearing that she lacked the natural musicality necessary for professional performance. It was going to be devastating. And in the emotional wreckage that followed, Eleanor was going to make the biggest mistake of her life. She was going to try to take my mother's life insurance money. I'd forgotten about the trust until I'd started going through my memories more carefully, trying to extract every useful detail from my previous life. But it came back to me one night, crystal clear. My mother had set up a trust for me before she died. $50,000, her life insurance payout that wasn't part of the marital assets. It was mine, untouchable until I turned 18, managed by her lawyer from before she married my father. I'd never gotten that money in my previous life. I died at 17. I'd always assumed it had eventually gone to my father after my death, then gotten absorbed into the general family finances. But as I dug deeper into the documentation, I realized something. Eleanor had tried to access it while I was in the coma. I found records, just fragments, pieces of conversations I'd overheard while semi-conscious, things said at my bedside when they thought I couldn't hear. Eleanor talking to my father about Riley's trust and how they could put it toward Bethany's education since I wasn't going to need it. My father, weakly protesting that it wasn't technically possible while I was still alive. Eleanor mentioning a lawyer who might be able to work around the padsa or restrictions given the circumstances. I died before she could finalize anything, but she'd tried. And with their finances now in free fall, with Eleanor desperate and my 18th birthday approaching in 4 months, I knew she was going to try again. She was going to attempt to somehow gain control of my mother's trust, forge my signature, or manipulate me into signing it over, something. I just needed her to make that move where I could document it. The London competition came and went exactly as I'd remembered. Bethany bombed. Not just failed, bombed. Her injured hands couldn't handle the technical demands. She missed entire passages. The performance was painful to watch, according to the reviews I found online afterward. They came home 2 days early, having canceled the rest of the trip. $25,000 spent for complete humiliation. Bethany locked herself in her room and wouldn't come out. Eleanor was white-faced and silent in a way that was somehow more terrifying than her usual manic energy. My father just looked defeated. "We're in trouble," he told me that night, coming to my room for the first time in months. "Real financial trouble. Eleanor maxed out the credit cards. We have debt collectors calling. I might have to sell the house." My mother's house. The house I'd grown up in. The last place that held memories of her. "I'm sorry, Dad," I said. And I was, not for him, really, but for the waste of it all. The way he'd let Eleanor destroy our family, destroy me for nothing. I know I haven't been a good father to you, he said, and he actually had tears in his eyes. I know, Eleanor, I know she favored Bethany. But I thought it would all work out. I thought if Bethany succeeded, everyone would be happy. Bethany didn't succeed, I said quietly. And even if she had, would that have made it okay, the way I was treated? He flinched. No, you're right. I'm sorry, Riley. I'm so sorry. It was too little, too late, and we both knew it. What are you going to do? I asked. I don't know. Bankruptcy, maybe. Sell the house. Eleanor wants to take out another loan to send Bethany to a different program, but I can't keep doing this. What about my trust? I asked, watching his face carefully. Mom's life insurance trust. I turn 18 in 4 months. That's my money, right? Something shifted in his expression. Guilt. Shame. Eleanor and I were talking about that. Maybe you could help the family. We're in crisis, Riley. Bethany's devastated. We could lose everything. That's my college money, I said. Mom left it specifically for me. I know, but maybe you could loan it to us? Just temporarily until we get back on our feet? There it was, the ask. They'd destroyed me for years, left me to suffocate, treated me like garbage, and now they wanted my mother's money. I need to think about it, I said. He nodded, relieved I hadn't immediately refused. Thank you. You're a good kid, Riley. Better than I deserve. After he left, I pulled out my phone and texted my lawyer. They're going to try to take the trust. How do we protect it? Her response was immediate. We file for emancipation ASAP and get a protective order. How soon can you move out? Now, I typed back, I can move out now. Because I'd been ready for months. I had money. I had a place lined up, a studio apartment I'd been secretly renting for 3 weeks, furnished with thrift store finds. I had all my important documents already hidden at Mrs. Chen's house. I had everything I needed to walk away. I just needed one last piece of evidence. Eleanor made her move 2 days later. I was in the kitchen when she approached me, her face arranged in an expression of maternal concern I'd never seen her direct at me before. It was jarring, like watching a robot attempt human emotion. Riley, honey, we need to talk about your trust fund. Dad mentioned it, I said carefully. Did he explain how much trouble we're in? This family is facing bankruptcy. We could lose the house, lose everything. And in a few months, you'll have access to $50,000 that could save us. That's my college money, I repeated. You can go to community college, Eleanor said, her mask slipping slightly, or get student loans like everyone else. But Bethany's career is at a critical point. She needs one more chance, one more program, and she needs therapy now to deal with the trauma of London. Do you know how much that costs? The audacity of it took my breath away. Bethany needed therapy for bombing one competition, but I'd nearly died from an asthma attack they'd ignored, and that was just me being dramatic. I don't think I want to give you my money, I said. Eleanor's expression hardened. You're being selfish. This is your family. We've given you everything. You've given me nothing, I said, my voice level. You've taken everything. You've stolen from me, neglected me, emotionally abused me for years. And now you want my mother's money? How dare you, Eleanor hissed. After everything we've done for you, giving you a home, food, clothing. Things you were legally required to provide, I interrupted, while spending hundreds of thousands on Bethany, while charging me rent at 16, while letting me nearly die because a piano recital was more important. Eleanor's face went white, then red. That was an accident. You're blowing it out of proportion. I have it documented, I said. The empty inhaler, the requests you ignored, the timestamps. Mrs. Chen's testimony, everything. Eleanor stared at me and I could see her recalculating. You can't prove anything. I can prove enough, and I'm not giving you my trust fund, ever. You ungrateful little bitch, Eleanor said, her voice shaking with rage. After everything I've sacrificed, you've sacrificed nothing for me, I said. You've sacrificed me for Bethany. There's a difference. Eleanor's hand shot out and grabbed my wrist, her nails digging in. You're going to sign over that trust or I'll make your life hell. More hell than leaving me to suffocate so you could watch Bethany play piano? I asked. She raised her hand to slap me. I saw it coming, tensed for it. But before she could connect, Mrs. Chen's voice came from the doorway. I wouldn't do that if I were you. We both spun around. Mrs. Chen stood there with her phone out, clearly recording. That's assault, Eleanor. And attempted extortion. I've recorded this entire conversation. Eleanor dropped my wrist like it burned her. This is none of your business. Riley is my business. She's under my protection now. Riley, honey, get your things. You're coming home with me. I didn't hesitate. I ran upstairs, grabbed my already packed backpack from my closet. I'd been ready for weeks and came back down. Eleanor was still standing there, frozen in shock. You can't just take her, Eleanor said. She's a minor. That's kidnapping. She's 17 and I have documentation of abuse and neglect, Ms. Chen said calmly. Try to stop her and I'll call the police. I'm sure they'd be very interested in why a teenager was left to have an asthma attack alone while you attended a piano recital. Eleanor's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. I walked past her, out the door, and into Mrs. Chen's house. I didn't look back. Behind me, I heard Eleanor start screaming for my father. I was free. The emancipation hearing was 3 weeks later. My father didn't contest it. I think he was relieved, honestly. One less problem to deal with. Eleanor tried to fight it, but her own behavior was so well documented that the judge barely listened to her objections. Young lady, the judge said to me, I've reviewed your financials and the evidence of the home environment. I'm satisfied that emancipation is in your best interest. However, I'm also filing a report with Child Protective Services regarding the asthma incident. That level of neglect is unacceptable. Eleanor had gone even paler at that. The CPS investigation wouldn't find enough for criminal charges. I'd made it clear I didn't want to press charges, but it would be on record. It would follow them. The trust fund was released to me on my 18th birthday 2 months later. $50,000 from my mother, who had loved me enough to protect a piece of herself for my future, even knowing she wouldn't be there to see it. I put it in an investment account and didn't touch it. I was doing fine on my own income. My blog had grown to the point where I was being courted by major music publications. My tutoring business was thriving. I'd been accepted to 3 universities with full scholarships. My grades had always been excellent, even through everything. I chose my mother's alma mater, a prestigious research university with a strong environmental science program. I was going to follow in her footsteps, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because she'd seen something beautiful in trying to save the world, and I wanted to see it too. But I wasn't done with my family yet. Because while I was free, they were still circling the drain, and I knew exactly how their story ended from my previous life. Bankruptcy, divorce, Bethany dropping out of music entirely and working at a mall, Eleanor bitter and alone. My father remarried to someone who actually made him happy, but guilt-ridden over what he'd allowed to happen to me. I could have let it play out naturally. But I decided I wanted a hand in their fate. Call it petty. Call it revenge. I called it justice. 6 months after my emancipation, I was starting my freshman year of college and living in a nice apartment near campus. I'd invested my blog income wisely. I'd learned a lot about cryptocurrency in my previous life, and I knew which coins were about to explode. My $40,000 in savings had become $200,000. My trust fund investments were performing well. I was wealthy by college student standards and getting wealthier. I used some of that money to hire a forensic accountant. I want you to look into my stepmother's finances, I told him. Eleanor Whitmore. Specifically, I want to know if she's committed any fraud or embezzlement. What makes you think she has? He asked. Call it a hunch. She was desperate for money, working at a pharmaceutical company that was in chaos during layoffs. People do stupid things when they're desperate. He found it within 2 weeks. Eleanor had been stealing from her employer for over a year before she was laid off. Small amounts at first, falsifying expense reports, diverting petty cash. But as Bethany's career expenses mounted, she'd gotten bolder. She'd created fake vendors and approved invoices to herself. She'd stolen nearly $80,000 by the time she was laid off. The company hadn't noticed during the chaos of the lawsuit and layoffs, but now, with my forensic accountant's report, they would. I sent the documentation anonymously to the company's fraud investigation department and to the district attorney's office. The charges were filed within a month. Eleanor was arrested at home in front of Bethany and my father. The bail was set high, $50,000. They couldn't afford it. She spent 3 weeks in jail before accepting a plea deal. 5 years in prison. Restitution of all stolen funds, a felony record that would follow her forever. Bethany called me after the sentencing. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "You did this," she said. "No, hello, just accusation." "You got her arrested. This is your revenge." "I gave the authorities factual information about crimes she committed," I said. "What they did with it was their choice." "She's going to prison because of you." "She's going to prison because she embezzled $80,000 to fund your piano career," I corrected. "A career that, by the way, is over. You weren't good enough, Bethany. You were never going to be good enough, and instead of accepting that and finding something else you were actually good at, Mom pushed and stole and destroyed everyone around you." "You're a monster," Bethany said, her voice breaking. "No," I said quietly. "I'm the person who survived you. There's a difference." I hung up. My father reached out a year later. Eleanor was in prison. He'd divorced her. He had no choice. Her legal fees and restitution had destroyed what little they had left. The house, my mother's house, had been sold. Bethany was living with Eleanor's sister and working at Target while attending community college for business. No more piano. She'd sold her Steinway to help with legal fees. "I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness," my father wrote in an email. "I failed you. I chose Eleanor's vision over your reality, and it almost cost you your life. It did cost you your childhood. I'm in therapy now trying to understand how I let it happen, how I could have been so blind." I didn't respond immediately. I sat with the email for a week, reading it over and over, trying to feel something. Anger, satisfaction, sadness, anything. What I felt was exhaustion and a strange distant pity. Finally, I wrote back, "I don't forgive you. Maybe someday, but not now. What you allowed Eleanor to do to me was unforgivable. You were my parent. Your first job was to protect me, and you failed. But I don't hate you either. I just don't think about you much anymore. I have my own life now, a good one. I'm doing research on water purification systems for developing countries. Mom would be proud. I have friends, professors who mentor me, a future I'm excited about. You're not part of that future. Maybe that's the real consequence. Not that I'm angry, but that I'm indifferent. You chose Eleanor and Bethany over me, and now you have neither of them, and you don't have me either. You're alone. That's the price." He wrote back, "That's fair, more than fair. I hope you have a wonderful life, Riley. You deserve it." I never responded to that email. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in environmental engineering. I was recruited by 3 major firms and a prestigious research institute. I chose the institute, more my mother's path than a corporate one. I was 22, financially secure, doing meaningful work, and genuinely happy. I'd published papers on sustainable water systems. I'd traveled to 6 countries to implement pilot programs. I'd made friends who knew nothing about my history, except that I was hardworking and passionate. I'd built a life my mother would have been proud of. One day, I was at a coffee shop near the institute when I saw her. Bethany. She was behind the counter wearing a green apron, taking orders. She looked older than 22, tired in a way that spoke of disappointment and crushed dreams. She saw me and froze. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then I ordered my coffee, a simple latte, and when she handed it to me, I said, "I hope you're doing okay." She blinked, surprised. "Why would you care?" "Because I'm not like Eleanor," I said. "I don't take pleasure in suffering, even when it's someone who hurt me. I just wanted justice, and I got it." "Justice," she repeated bitterly. "My mom's in prison. I'm working retail. You destroyed our family." No, I said gently. Eleanor destroyed our family when she decided that your piano career was more important than basic human decency. When she stole money to fund it. When she let me nearly die for it. I didn't do any of those things. I just made sure the truth came out. The truth, Bethany said, is that you got your revenge and you're happy and we're miserable. The truth, I corrected, and is that I survived. I built something better. And you could too if you stopped blaming me for Eleanor's choices and your own limitations. I left before she could respond, but as I walked away, I felt a weight lift that I hadn't even known I was carrying. Seeing Bethany diminished and bitter didn't make me happy exactly, but it did make me feel settled, like a chapter had finally closed. Eleanor got out of prison after serving 3 years. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she was working as a secretary in a small firm, barely making ends meet, still blaming everyone but herself for how her life had turned out, still insisting that Bethany had been robbed of her rightful career. My father remarried a kind woman he'd met at his therapy group. She'd lost her husband to cancer and understood grief and guilt. They seemed happy in a quiet, healing way. He tried to reach out again on my 25th birthday. I didn't respond. Some bridges once burned stay burned. I'm 30 now. I lead a research team developing water purification systems for refugee camps. My work has improved lives in 17 countries. I've won awards, been featured in publications, been invited to speak at conferences around the world. I have a partner, a fellow scientist who makes me laugh and challenges me intellectually and holds me when the old nightmares of suffocating still occasionally surface. I have friends who are family in the truest sense. I have a life full of meaning and purpose. Sometimes people ask if I have family. I say yes. I talk about my mother, about how brilliant and loving she was, how she taught me to see the beauty in science, how her death shaped my path. I talk about Mrs. Chen, who saved my life and gave me the strength to save myself. I talk about my found family, my chosen family. I don't mention Eleanor or Bethany or my father. They're not part of my story anymore, except as a chapter of survival. A chapter that taught me that family is about love and care and protection, not about blood or legal ties. And sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I think about that moment on the couch when I was 17, gasping for air, watching my family leave me to die for a piano recital. I remember the terror, the betrayal, the absolute loneliness of knowing that the people who were supposed to love me had chosen a performance over my life. But then I remember what came after, the rebirth, the second chance, the knowledge that I used to build something better, the strength I found in myself to not just survive but to thrive. They chose her piano recital over my emergency. They thought I was powerless, expendable, someone they could ignore and use and discard. After Rebirth, I never called 911 again, because I never needed to. I learned to save myself. I learned that the best revenge isn't destruction. It's building a life so good, so meaningful, so full of genuine love and purpose that the people who hurt you become irrelevant. I learned that surviving them wasn't just about getting away. It was about becoming someone they could never touch, never diminish, never destroy. And I did. I survived. I thrived. I won. Not because I destroyed them, though justice being served was satisfying, I won't lie, but because I built a life my mother would be proud of. Because I became someone who uses my advantages, whether foreknowledge or resources or intelligence, to help people, not hurt them. Because in the end, the best revenge is living well. And God, I'm living so well. Last month, I received a letter. It was from Bethany. It had been forwarded through several addresses before finding me. I'd moved countries for my current research position. The letter was short. Riley, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I'm in therapy now, really dealing with everything that happened, with what Mom did to you, what I allowed to happen to you. I was jealous of you from the start. Did you know that? You were smart and kind, and Dad loved you naturally, while he only ever loved me through Mom's pushing. I resented you for existing, for reminding me that I wasn't enough on my own. Mom's in therapy too. Court mandated at first, but she's actually engaging now. She admitted that she stole because she couldn't accept that I wasn't going to be a star, that she'd tied her entire identity to my success and couldn't let go even when it was destroying everyone. I'm not asking you to care about our healing. You don't owe us anything. I just thought you should know that we finally understand what we did, how horrible it was, how we almost killed you. I'm working as an office manager now. No more piano. I actually hate piano now, though I'm working through that in therapy too. I'm taking accounting classes. I'm good at it. Who knew? I hope you're happy. I mean that. You deserved so much better than what we gave you, Bethany. I read the letter 3 times. Then I put it in my desk drawer and went back to work. A week later, I wrote back, just 1 line. Thank you for acknowledging it. I hope you find peace. I meant it, not because I forgave her exactly, not because we'd ever be sisters in any real sense, but because her acknowledging the truth mattered, because healing, even for people who hurt you, is better than festering. Because I'd learned that holding on to rage is exhausting, and I had better things to do with my energy. I had water systems to build, lives to improve, a partner to love, research to conduct, a world to save, one purification system at a time. I had my mother's legacy to honor, and that's what I chose to focus on. Not the family that failed me, but the woman who loved me. Not the past that tried to destroy me, but the future I built from its ashes. They chose her piano recital over my emergency. After Rebirth, I chose myself, my dreams, my purpose, my life. And that made all the difference.